So the Arctic is undergoing profound and historic physical and geopolitical changes that will impact every nation and every generation moving forward. Americans and most countries view the world through the Mercator projection, which has been the standard map for navigation, a map that shows North America and South America in the middle, with the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans in the center. The Arctic Ocean off to the edge, out of sight and therefore out of mind. Today, these artificial lines on a map are collapsing and converging, especially in the northern navigable rimland of Europe, Asia, and North America, stretching from the Atlantic Ocean through the vast Arctic Ocean to the Bering Strait in North Pacific, down to the southern tip of the Aleutian Island chain. Now, temperatures across the Arctic Ocean region are increasing 2 to 4 times faster than the global average. And over the 42-year satellite record, the Arctic has lost over 640,000 square miles of sea ice in a month of March, an area the size of Alaska. And if this trend persists, the Arctic may have little or no ice in the summertime by the end of this decade, and mostly thin, young, and very unstable ice during its much warmer winters. And so a blue Arctic Ocean is emerging, offering new opportunities to transit, trade, and fish in what has historically been frozen waters. Now, the northern sea route along Russia's coastline is the most navigable sea route, cutting as much as 40% off of distance traveled compared to the sea routes used today. The Northwest Passage along Canada's coastline will likely remain a less viable option for regular commercial shipping because of its shallow depths, narrow features, and sparse infrastructure. But the real game changer, and the one overlooked by many scholars and practitioners alike, is the transpolar route, which is more of a reality toward mid-century, opening maritime traffic and trade right over the North Pole. The fastest, shortest, and cheapest east-west trade route of any by far. And still today, 90% of all trade by volume still travels across the world's oceans, with seaborne trade expected to double over the next 15 years. The Arctic is also home to some of the world's largest oil and gas formations, 13% of the world's undiscovered hydrocarbons, and 30% of natural gas lies above the Arctic Circle, nearly 85% of which lie offshore, with heavy concentrations in Alaska, Russia, Greenland, and towards the North Pole. And it was the ensuing rush for whale oil off the Alaskan coast that gave birth to the American Arctic 153 years ago, bringing an end to Russia's 125-year odyssey in Alaska and its expansion across the treacherous Bering Sea. Now, just in terms of wealth, the U.S. gained about 370 million acres of mostly pristine wilderness and an area the size of Texas and almost a third of the size of the European Union. Hundreds of $billions in fish, fuel, and rare earth minerals have been produced in Alaska over the years. And today, the Arctic region is home to 40 different ethnic groups and indigenous communities. And no matter where you travel across the region, indigenous groups face the same challenges: economic inequalities resulting from immigration, loss of traditional knowledge, along with high rates of substance abuse, suicide, and domestic violence, and lack of political participation. Education and capital are just a few of the major barriers impeding growth and opportunity. So in this new era of great power competition, what we're seeing is China moving vertically north and Russia moving horizontally east and west across the Arctic. In 2008, China released its first Arctic policy, and despite being more than 4,000 miles away from the Arctic Circle, the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, declared China to be a near-Arctic state, making clear its ambitions to secure access to Arctic sea routes and natural resources. And so what we're seeing is a China that's executing a multi-pronged Arctic strategy with heavy doses of science, diplomacy, and economics, a strategy aimed at gaining access in and influence over Arctic states and the people and nations who live along these routes. And so as China moves vertically north, Russia is moving horizontally east and west, and a prominent figure in Russia's past is emerging in the form of Vladimir Putin, who, like Peter the Great, has high hopes for the Arctic and has devoted much of his life trying to make Russia a great maritime power. Russia by far remains the biggest player in the Arctic, both in terms of territory and resources, with 50% of the total coastline in the region. And the Russian Arctic already makes up 20% of Russia's GDP, and it's only going to grow. And in many ways, the Arctic will define Putin's legacy. So he's personally involved in building Russia's maritime military capabilities and posture, building out a string of ports and infrastructure along its northern coastline, and ambitious energy exploration projects, including the world's largest LNG project in the Yamal Peninsula. And so what's happening is China's sphere of influence and Russia's sphere of influence are overlapping in the north. You have Chinese troops on the Russian land border, and drilling platforms, fishing trawlers in Russian waters, and port facilities on Russian territory. Western sanctions have driven Russia and China closer together in the Arctic, where Chinese companies and government agencies are now major shareholders in energy and port infrastructure projects. And so greater access and maritime activity, especially military activity in the Arctic, increases the risk of accidents, miscalculation, and conflict. Risks that can be mitigated by building awareness, by creating confidence-building measures, and employing capabilities between nations and navies. And this starts with Arctic nations and navies, and specifically between the United States and Russia.